Hi, everyone. If you are reading Chapter 3, Cultivating a Teaming Culture, we are here today talking to Jennifer Wildman. Dr. Jennifer Wildman. She is the former superintendent of Mammoth Unified School District in Mammoth Lakes, California, and she is now luckily retired. But we wanted to bring her in to kind of talk about ways to build community, to get community involved in all of your community and what's most important. And there are lots of different ways to do it. We talk about in the book about co-constructing your agreements and your core beliefs, but this is just another way to bring the community together to kind of talk about your values. And I was really lucky enough to lead that work with Jennifer. But I remember getting all these texts and emails about how excited she was that this work really brought it together. And we're just here today to talk to Jennifer to hear about how that went and the impact that made on the community in Mammoth. So Jennifer, take it away.
Woo! Well, we were entering kind of an interesting time. It was right after the pandemic, and we had been hit pretty hard. We'd had a lot of school closures, and the focus really hadn't been on learning and students for a long time. So we were very happy to get to come back together in person for the first time in, a very long time. And the first thing we wanted to do was really focus on students and what made them successful. We were really lucky in Mammoth. We had a very successful remote learning program because we'd had one for a long time. We had a lot of elite athletes who were independent study students. And so we knew what to do, but we definitely found that some of our kids were really successful on remote learning, that they really liked it. And part of what we thought that was student agency. They really got to make a lot of decisions about what they learned, when they learned it, how they learned it. And that was kind of exciting. So we really sat down right after that with you and talked about what a successful learner does. What kinds of things do they have, in their heart and in their minds to help them learn and grow, kind of independently with our help, of course. So we went through like all of the characteristics that we thought, the habits of mind, the habits of heart, things that we thought really helped them. And we talked about which ones we thought our students really used. And we wrote those all down and talked about each one and how they fit into what we wanted all of our kids to do to be successful. And then we had a little process where we went through them and we chose them together. We chose about a dozen, and then we included our parents, which we thought was really important too. So we sent out a survey to parents. We told them what we were doing, and the parents also got to kind of weigh in on the learning dispositions that they thought their kids would also need. And it was very exciting because it was the first time in a long time where we all looked at students together and we all kind of gathered around the kids and really focused on what they needed. And it was a really refreshing time for everybody. We used the dispositions, we unpacked them together, and then we also used them in our vertical teams. So we had vertical content teams. And all of the vertical teams talked about how they impacted their content. So in our English classes looked at, character development and what dispositions some of the characters had. And, other teams used them in different ways. We had, elementary school classes that really read books about them and taught about each disposition. We did newsletters to parents. It was also a time where parents were very worried about their students' social emotional health, their mental health. So that was a great way to focus on the positive and really, get back to normal, but not just normal, kind of get back to better. And it was very student focused, and that was really the best part.
What I appreciate about how you kind of launched the conversation is that you were looking at the assets of your students that were wildly successful during the pandemic at a time where many students might not have been. And I think sometimes as educators, we were really surprised at some of the students that really took off. So what I really appreciate about that conversation and how we started it is that you focused on the assets of those kids and how can we cultivate those dispositions and even more kids, and also knowing that our kids are already probably coming to school with them.
Right.
They just don't know they're supposed to bring them to algebra.
Yep.
right? Because you had world-class skiers and your community was really different too. Like, I think your community is very similar to a lot of communities where there's the kind of the haves,
Yes.
folks that have a lot of privilege, and then there's
Mhm.
the folks that don't.
Yep.
How do you think
Yep.
this process help to close opportunity gaps
You
for
know, first
kids?
of yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I think we were very pleasantly surprised that some kids that we thought would not do okay during distance learning did great. Like
Yeah,
some of our kids who were not privileged, who were home and struggling. And there were lots that we really had to help. We had to make sure they had a hotspot and we had to make sure everybody knew how to use it. And, that there
right.
was space for them to come together. We opened our schools for individual students to come that couldn't really get, the access that they needed. But at the same time, we also had other kids who really surprised us, who had all this, agency that they weren't getting to use, right? We were telling them what to do, and now they were home and we weren't telling them what to do. And a lot of those kids told us they really enjoyed having choice, having some decision making. And the teachers also told us that they had a lot closer of relationships with their kids too. So when we saw those things made a difference, this was our chance to put them into action when we all came back and not just reset to what we used to be. So this conversation really opened up that idea of, hey, we've got kids who, the opportunity gap, the key word is opportunity. We need to give them the opportunity, to show that they can do this. And we can do that when we're in person, just like we can when we're remote. And we can pay attention to each individual student and their strengths and play on those assets when they're
Yeah,
in person, just like we can when they're at home, right? So that was a
yeah,
big part of the conversation. And it was exciting because it was kind of a, weird time. All of a sudden, we're all coming back in person. We're all
yeah.
getting used to what that feels like. But lucky kids, we had this base to, really focus everybody on something positive. So it did provide a kind of a framework for us to keep talking about what we can do to help kids move along and to grow both independently and with our help.
Yeah, yeah. From my perspective, in working with a lot of systems, this was a time where I know we needed unity
Mhm.
across the country. And I just remember getting those messages that this was an area that actually supported that. In closing this conversation, if you were giving like a tip to other superintendents or leaders, or even parents and families around a way to build community around the habits of learning, like what might be a tip B, or what might be something that you took away from this experience that you'd hope that other people could learn from?
I think when you pick something positive that's student-centered, that's focused on kids, you can't help but build community because that's what everybody is there for, right? The parents love their kids, the teachers are there because they love to teach, the staff loves the kids, the
Yeah,
administrators want everybody to grow. So if you can focus on something positive that's based on students, I do think that you'll always be able to unify. And it was absolutely a tough time in the
yeah,
community and in the school district. There was a lot happening that was not unified. There were a lot of people that weren't agreeing on a lot of things. And this was an opportunity. I mean, how can you turn down, the fact that we all need to be persistent or that we need to have gratitude, or
yeah,
or that students need to be self-aware. I mean, you can't help but have a positive outcome and a really building of that circle around the kids of protection and support, if you focus on something that positive. So it was
yeah.
great.
So I think it fits with the theme that seems so simple, right? That when you focus on an organization's assets, the human assets within an organization, and you focus on those assets to learn more, you can build consensus and build community, and you don't really have to choose. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much for helping the readers understand from your perspective another way to build community around learning.
Thank you, Paul.